The billionaire sat alone in the back seat of his limousine, his face buried in his trembling hands. Outside, rain poured over the city like a curtain of sorrow. No board meeting, no luxury, no empire could silence the storm inside him. For the first time in his life, Alexander Grant, a man worth billions, was weeping, not because of money lost, but because something deeper had slipped away. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're rewatching from. I love knowing who's listening. He had just left the hospital where his only son lay unconscious after a terrible car accident. The doctor said there was little hope. Machines breathed for the boy now, and Alexander, the man who could buy anything, found himself utterly powerless. The limousine stopped at a red light, and through the fogged window Alexander noticed a figure sitting under a bridge. Beggar. Thin-drenched, holding a cardboard sign that read, "Hungry but grateful." Something about that word, grateful, made Alexander's chest tighten. Impulsively, he stepped out, ignoring his driver's protests. The rain was cold, harsh against his expensive suit. He approached the man slowly, his voice low. "You're grateful for this?" The beggar looked up. His face was weathered but calm, his eyes bright with something Alexander hadn't seen in years. "Peace. Gratitude isn't about what you have," he said gently. "It's about what's left when everything's gone." Alexander froze. He didn't know why, but those words struck him like a revelation. For years he had chased success, built skyscrapers, crushed rivals, yet here sat a man with nothing but an old blanket, speaking as if he owned the world. He crouched down, rain dripping from his hair. "What's your name?" "Samuel," the beggar said with a faint smile. "And yours?" "Alexander Grant." Samuel chuckled softly. "You don't need to tell me. I've seen your face in the newspapers. They say you own half the city. Must be heavy, carrying all that." Alexander let out a breath that sounded like a broken laugh, heavier than you think. The two men sat under that bridge for hours. For once, Alexander wasn't the one giving, he was the one receiving. Samuel told him stories of losing his family, of hitting rock bottom, of discovering something precious in the ruins of his life. "When I lost everything," he said, "I thought life was over. But then I realized peace doesn't come from having more. Comes from needing less." Alexander stared at the beggar's hands, scarred, dirty, trembling slightly, yet steady as he tore a piece of bread in half and offered it to him. "You look hungry," Samuel said. In that moment, Alexander felt something inside him shift. A man with billions being fed by one with nothing. It was humbling, almost holy. That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. Samuel's words replayed in his head. What's left when everything's gone? He went back to the hospital the next morning, not as a CEO, not as a billionaire, but as a father. He sat beside his son's bed, holding his hand, whispering stories instead of signing documents. He prayed something he hadn't done in years. Days passed, then weeks, and slowly, a miracle happened. His son opened his eyes, weak, dazed, but alive. The doctors called it unbelievable. Alexander called it grace. When his son was strong enough to leave, Alexander returned to that bridge, but Samuel was gone. The space was empty except for the soggy cardboard sign that read, "Hungry but grateful." He asked around, checked shelters, hospitals. No one had seen him. It was as if Samuel had vanished into the rain. Months later, during a charity event, Alexander stood before hundreds of people, investors, journalists, politicians, and for the first time he spoke from his heart instead of his ego. "I met a man," he began, his voice steady. "He owned nothing but taught me everything. He reminded me that wealth isn't measured in money, but in gratitude, forgiveness, and love." The crowd was silent. Some smiled, some looked uncomfortable, but Alexander didn't care. He had changed. From that day on, his company shifted its mission, opening shelters, feeding families, building schools in forgotten corners of the city, and on the door of every project, he had one phrase engraved in bronze, "Hungry but grateful." Years later, when people asked him what turned his life around, he'd smile and say, "A beggar showed me what money couldn't teach, that peace begins where greed ends." And sometimes, late at night, he'd walk back to that same bridge, just to sit there, close his eyes, and listen to the rain. In its rhythm, he could almost hear Samuel's voice again, because kindness doesn't vanish, it waits, and it finds its way back. And though the world above rushed with noise and ambition, Under that bridge there was silence, a sacred silence where a billionaire once learned to be human again. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that love and gratitude are worth more than gold. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove, sometimes the poorest hearts carry the richest lessons.